And I don't know who puts out, if somebody does a JSJ tweet, AJ, can't remember. Since Chuck and
It should
Dan
go
aren't
live,
here.
and then we should. I think it's going to happen automatically, and then we just retweet it.
Oh, does it happen automatically? Okay, shows how much I know. Oh, we're live. Okay.
All right, I'm refreshing. I'm refreshing again. I'm refreshing. And I'm refreshing. Yes, we got it. We got it. Here goes.
Alrighty.
Here's the link. Here's the link to tweet. If I can find the, there we go. There it is. Boom. All right, retweet it hardcore.
Alrighty, so I'll jump in and do intro, and then we'll get talking. Let's see, recording, AJ, all of us. Yep, we're good. All right. All right, here we go. I have my own little intro. It's very special. You'll hear it. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of JavaScript Jabber. I am Steve Edwards, the host with the face for radio and the voice for being a mime, but I'm still your host, at least for today. Chuck is out, had some work to do. Dan is on vacation, so he's taking some time off. So it's me, and on the panel, I have Mr. AJ O'Neill. How you doing, AJ?
I'm doing fine, flipping fantastic.
Yo.
I added the yo.
Oh, did you?
I did it on the back end.
Oh, back end. Sorry.
Okay. You asked me a question, so I gave you the answer, and then I added the yo. Okay. Yo, coming at you live from, my goodness, isn't the weather heavenly today?
Yes, it is here too. It's awesome. I was thinking fall was coming way too early last week, but it's warming up. It's supposed to be 90 here in Portland tomorrow. So we're looking at some sunny skies and some good weather. So
we did a drive through the mountains yesterday with the kiddos.
Did you
see the fall colors? Yeah, it was wonderful.
Yeah. Okay, it is after the 21st, so I guess we can start calling it fall now, can't we? Although here we tend to have really nice September and October, Indian summer they call it. So that's always nice. Anyway, as we blabber on, let's welcome our guest, Mr. Daniel Kelly. How you doing, Daniel?
Hey, Steve, doing great. Great to be here.
So Daniel is a prominent member of the Vue.js community. And so since I don't do the Views on Vue podcast anymore, I like to bring in some Vue.js content into JavaScript Jabber every once in a while. And this is my chance.
It's a must. Yeah. You gotta rep Vue here.
Yes, that's right. We need a good view of what's going on. Sorry, I missed my, dang it. I missed my sound effect. I'll do a delay. There we go. Thank you. Okay, so first of all, Daniel, why don't you just give us an intro on who you are and why you're famous, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So I am the lead instructor over at Vue School. We're one of the primary places you can go to learn Vue.js, whether you're a beginner or even a more advanced Vue person. We've got all kinds of tutorials available for everyone. So I've been working with Vue School for almost 4 years now. Has it really been that long? Yeah.
Wow.
Getting older, I think. Yeah. So we also run in the conference kind of circuit there. I go to conferences all the time with Vue School. We put on a few virtual conferences, and also have recently got into the certification space. So we worked with Evan Yu to create an official Vue.js certificate. So you can take an exam, show potential employers I know my stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's kind of what I do on the day-to-day these days.
So let's talk about that for a minute. I know way back when, before I got into web development, I was doing software, and I got into doing some network certifications. So if you're looking at network certifications, for instance, I was doing on one, this is Windows. This is early days of Linux. I don't even know if Linux was out yet, but like Windows NT network certifications, there's A+ certifications. And I know that it's seen as a way to say, hey, I really know what I'm talking about. I can remember when I was in the Drupal world, there was always the issue when hiring a developer to do a Drupal site for you. How do you know that they know their stuff? And I know that Drupal has come up with certification tests. If I remember, I haven't looked in a while. So, Vue development, any type of development, can cover a wide array of topics, you know.
Absolutely.
So I'm just curious. This is the first chance I've had to talk to somebody about this. Can you talk about what's involved in generating a certification test? And obviously, you got
Yep.
the input from the guy who created Vue, which is you can't get much lower level than that in computer speak, right?
That's right. We're
Um,
very happy about that for sure.
right, and then what does it cover? What are the main areas of
So we've got
study?
it really focuses on like core Vue.js, right? And we have two different levels of the certification. So there's like a mid-level or just kind of regular level developer cert, and then there's the senior level developer certification. And so at level one, we're basically testing, hey, do you know just like the basics of Vue, right? Can you create a component? Do you know how props and emits work? Do you know how to, how to start a Vue application? But kind of basic things like that. And the way we test you on that is we provide multiple choice questions at the beginning of the exam. And then we provide two different coding challenges that you have to complete to build some kind of little app, right? So it's fairly in depth in terms of what you actually have to do to pass the exam. I mean, if you can't create this, if you can't complete the coding challenge and actually write the code for yourself, you're not going to pass. And then at the senior level, it's the same structure. It's multiple choice questions and two different coding challenges. But the topics are a little bit more advanced. Things like using TypeScript with Vue, things like writing tests for your Vue components, things like so a few more advanced things that are a little less used, but can be very useful for creating, intuitive APIs for your components. Things like provide inject, for example. So yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, and we've had a lot of good feedback from people. One of my favorite things to share is actually we have a boot camp that goes along with the certification as well. It's a 3-day boot camp. It's a virtual thing, right? But it's basically me or a colleague of mine doing a just a educational style boot camp thing. And people can ask questions, and we go over all the different topics that are on the exam and teach the concepts and so on. But I actually had one guy who works on a very popular UI library in the Vue community who attended. You're like, why would he attend? Like he knows Vue, right? And he came out telling me he learned stuff. So I really like to talk about that. It's really makes me feel good.
So I assume that there's a huge number of apps that are out there and still in Vue 2. I mean, I work on a very large one every day. And, V3 has been out for, is it 2 years now? I want to say.
It was since 2020, actually, I believe. I think it's been almost 4 years now.
Is it really? Wow. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have, a lot of Vue 2 stuff out there, but Vue 3 is the latest and greatest. So are there certification to test for both, or is everything focused on Vue 3?
That's a great question. It is focused on Vue 3. All of our exams focus on the current level, and as soon as the current latest is changed to increment to the next thing, then we will have new exam material for that next level. That's kind of our strategy there. But yeah, it's all Vue 3. It does focus on the composition API as opposed to the options API. Because that is the recommendation from the Vue.js docs now, and that's the direction Evan wanted to take it while we were developing it. So yeah.
Okay. So any ballpark figure on how many people have taken it so far?
Oh, how many have taken it? That's a really great question. Oof. I couldn't give you an exact number. I know it's, we're literally getting people taking it every day. Their exams come in every day for the past year. So do the math on that. I'm not sure exactly how many, but yeah.
So is this run through Vue School? Is Vue School that's running the certification test, or is it more of a open source type thing, I guess, for lack of a better term?
Right. It is our team that produces the content along with third parties like Evan. but the brand is called certificates.dev. So the website is certificates.dev,
Okay.
and we started out with just the Vue exam, but we found that was so meaningful to people that we pivoted to also, well, not pivoted, we expanded to also do other certifications as well. So now we also offer an Angular certification.
Oh, really?
We're actually launching tomorrow a JavaScript certification, a more general JavaScript certification, and we offer a Nux certification as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'll put the little link up here in the little banner here for a second. Angular. So do you have somebody with Angular expertise that's doing that one?
We do, absolutely. So we partnered with a guy named Alan. Oh, he's gonna kill me because I'm gonna butcher his last name. Gerard, I think it is. Anyways, he had an Angular certification that he's been working on for years, and he wanted to partner with us just to make his processes a little bit easier and so on. So he is definitely an expert with that kind of material and provided a lot of that. It was just a matter of changing it up a little bit to fit our standards and our platform requirements.
Okay. Yeah. So here's the Vue one. Interesting. So having had to administer and take online tests and scenarios and stuff, out of curiosity, how you mentioned that there's some multiple choice questions throughout the test, and then there's some coding challenges and things. So how is that done? Is that like a clonable repo that you can do and push back to a repo, or is it just like an online thing, like a HackerRank
Right.
environment, or how exactly is that test done?
So it is all in the browser. In fact, we're pretty what's the word for it? We are literally watching you during the exam. There's this entire proctoring setup.
Right.
Yeah, it's intense, right? There's your camera's on, your screen is being monitored, your mic is on. It's monitoring everything. AG, you want to say something? I can tell.
I always bomb those. Like
Me too.
when the
I just
pressure
did
is
a couple
on.
weeks ago. Oh yeah, I bombed one bad.
Yeah, when the pressure is on like that, I forget how to do FizzBuzz. and oftentimes, it seems like in most of those situations, they're looking for a very specific answer. So it's not like, hey, here's a problem that's reasonable to have, and then like walk us through what are you thinking about that and how would you solve it. It's okay, so you've got the numbers 12, 27, 8, and 4. They're in an array, but they're backwards. They're inside of an object, and you need to have less than O2 login. like, so how do you solve this problem? And it's like, what? Huh?
Yes.
and then like you solve it, and they're like, well, that's not the solution that we have in our book sheet here. So
totally. Yeah. And we've done a lot of work to try to avoid that as much as we can while still being, you have to have the parameters that they work in. And we tried to make the coding challenges specifically kind of lifelike things. For example, I don't want to give too much away, but maybe there's, in the Vue one, maybe you have to create like a carousel, right? That has some kind of functionality that requires JavaScript, rotating the images, blah, blah, so on and so forth. So we try to make it a fairly realistic thing where you understand what the goal is. So yeah, that's kind of our way of trying to avoid the situation you're talking about. But we definitely have found over time that we've had little instances exactly like you're talking about, and people would report such things to us, and we've been able to work and improve it over time. So during the coding challenge portion of the exam, it is all in your browser. We embed a StackBlitz project into the platform. I don't know if you've heard of StackBlitz before.
So last week we just talked to Tomek Solkowski from StackBlitz about Tutorial Kit, and I was about to ask you if that was what you were using, or maybe it was just embedding StackBlitz within in the test.
Yep, that's right. It is just the classic StackBlitz embed. They came out with Tutorial Kit, I believe. They actually launched. They announced it. They launched it at JavaScript. Oh shoot, now I'm getting my conference names mixed up. At Front End Nation, which is a conference View School puts on, an online conference. So yeah, that wasn't quite out when we first
Oh, okay.
released the certification. Yeah.
So yes, we do know StackBlitz. We've had Eric Simons on. I think when they first started talking about embedding Node in the browser a few years ago. So yeah, we're familiar with StackBlitz.
Right. I'm sure it sounded a little crazy at that point, but I love it.
Right, for sure. So cool. What about, okay, so people are coming in and taking the certification test, say, hey, I got the certificate, I can do Vue. Have you seen that being utilized, requested in the employment community in terms of people who are actually looking for Vue developers? What kind of reception has that been getting?
Sure. That's an excellent question. From my point of view, I don't have any, I guess, case studies per se on the employer side of, hey, we were looking for a Vue developer and we saw some of our applicants had a Vue certification, and so they're the ones we hired. Honestly, our marketing team would probably have a ton of that, ton of that valuable stuff, right?
Right.
But I definitely heard testimonials from Vue developers themselves who have said, hey, I got this in order to help me with the job search. Whether it actually ended up helping them in the long run, that's something I don't have the feedback on, to be honest. But one thing we also think is a really great benefit, besides just the higher ability of a developer getting the cert, we also think another great benefit, and something we hear actually from people who've taken the exam, is that they really just want to take it to kind of give them the confidence that they're up to date and they're knowledgeable. Like, they can kind of feel confident that, hey, I have the knowledge it takes to be a modern day Vue developer. And so that's something they self-evaluate, right? And we get a lot of feedback about that being the case for them.
So it's sort of just a measuring tool, I guess, or a way to bone up on what's the latest and make sure you're learning the right thing and not focusing on something that's antiquated that's going to go away.
Right, exactly right. Because Evan reviewed it all and said, hey, this is what you need to know, right? And yeah, we have had a few employers, I know specifically, who have bought this exam for their employees in order to give people raises or elevate them in their position in the team, things like that.
Right.
So that's been a successful use case for it.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's talk about, we'll do some shameless plugs towards the end for Vue School. Just in terms of Vue in general, obviously we talked about how Vue 3 came out almost 4 years ago, or a little over 4 years ago. And
I want to Google that, Steve. I don't want to tell you all the wrong thing. Vue v3.
Yeah.
When did it come out? Let's see.
22.
I'm sure you
it's 2 years. Okay. Oh no.
Oh, it is 22?
22. No, yeah. I'm sorry. It was officially released on September 18th, 2020. Became the default version in February 22.
Yep. That's okay. Accurate.
So if you go to Vue the Vue website, it's by default is Vue 3, and you got to click on a link to go view the Vue 2 docs.
Yep.
Is what sort of makes it the default. So we're on, as we were talking about before, and we're on about 3.5 is the current release of Vue. What's the latest and greatest coming out of Vue with the latest releases, since you're probably right on top of that?
Absolutely. So Vue 3.3 was a pretty big one. So with that came Define Model. I'm not sure if you've used Define Model yet. It's a really handy kind of wrapper around a common pattern for taking a prop in and then emitting an event up whenever the value for that prop changes. So think of like a custom input field, right? You bring a prop in that's called model value, and then you send a event up called update model value, right? And so Define Model essentially just lets you skip the kind of song and dance there and directly alter the prop that came in inside of your child component. So whenever you actually assign a new value to that prop, you're not actually mutating the prop, which would be a no-no, right?
Hmm.
Instead, what it's doing under the hood is it's emitting update model value for you. So it's just a little ergonomic um, quality of development thing. So that was a kind of big addition to 3.3. Now that's been quite a number of months now since that one's been out.
Can I ask you
Three-
one question real quick? One of the things I used to
Yeah.
talk about was component V model, which
Mhm,
is basically where you have a parent and a child, and you can do something within the child and then emit it back up to the parent. And the example I have is one that I actually use in an Inertia app,
Okay.
where I have a just like an index listing in a table, and then within I do the table itself is a separate component, but the search field that I'm using it is in the parent. And because I'm using Inertia, I got to use a defined URL. So basically in my table, I say, I do all my stuff, or no, I take it back. My route has to be defined in the parent. The search field is actually in the child. And so I read the child, pass it up to the parent so it can call the URL. And that's basically a component V model where you can map that real easily and have that dynamic field. Is this different, or is this an improvement on component V model, or are they different things?
It's very similar. So really we are talking about the same thing. Like it's the V model using the V model in the parent on the child component. That's exactly what this is supporting.
Okay.
But it's just when you're doing your logic inside the child, it's making that logic inside the child a little bit easier to reason about and shorter, less lines to write.
Okay. So it's sort of along the same. Yeah, it's an easy way to, because it's one of the thornier problems with making everything a self-contained component, so you don't have this huge, 500 line component with everything in it. You can break things into reusable components, but then you got to communicate between the parent and the child. And that's where it gets really sticky in dynamic ways. So, okay. So sorry to interrupt. So you were going on from there.
No worries. So 3.4, honestly, I have no real recollection of what that was.
Very important release.
Yeah, truly minor release, right? At least in my mind. So 3.5, just because it's very recent, I am thinking about, of course, there's always performance improvements in every release, right? But also 3.5 brought about a feature called props destructure. So when you're working with the composition API inside of your script setup tags, you use a macro called define props in order to define your props, right? Well, if you wanted to add defaults to your props, you had to use this weird with defaults method, kind of wrap the whole define props call, and then have a second argument to the with defaults be your actual defaults. So you're kind of like declaring your props here, and then you're declaring the defaults for those props here. And you kind of have to, put those keys in twice, and it's just kind of weird and cumbersome. And then when you're working with your props, you have to say const props equals define props, and then you're working with those, those props off of that props object. So what props destructure does is it allows you to destructure your props from define props. Okay, so now you're not working with props dot blah 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 all throughout the component, throughout the script section anyway. Now you can just get the actual prop name, right? So
I got to start using this.
And it's seamless. They're not real reactive refs, so you don't have to use .value. They're under the hood. It actually compiles back to props dot whatever the prop name is. It's just super handy. And the other benefit is you can define the defaults in the destructure statement. There's no with defaults function that you have to do anymore.
Very nice.
That's the big ad for 3.5.
I've wrestled with that for quite a while in a particular app that I do. So I got to look into this for sure.
Okay. Yeah, definitely do.
Let's see. So I'm looking at your View School article on what's coming in 3.5. So use template ref.
Yep.
Use ID. That's more for server side rendering, it looks like.
It is. That's a really cool one, though, especially if you're in the Nuxt world. Just getting a uniquely generated ID, but it's that same uniquely generated ID both on the client and the server. So there's no more like juggling and passing the unique ID that you generate on the server down to the client. You just call it, and it's the same everywhere. There's no hydration mismatch issues, which has just been a pain in the past.
Right. That's a good segue. So moving into Nuxt, we had talked earlier about Nuxt and what's going on with Nuxt, and you had mentioned a few bullet points. For those in the JavaScript world who might not know what Nuxt is basically Next for React. I don't remember which came first, and I know Next is alphabetically before Nuxt, so maybe it came first.
I think that's the case, yeah.
Right. I think Angular has a sort of similar tool they came out with. I can't remember what it's called. Svelte has SvelteKit. So
Right.
just so you can understand the Nuxt side of things, where Vue is just primarily front-end JavaScript, Nuxt gives you the whole server rendering stack.
Steve, I think Next like had to come out first because Nuxt is like a play on words on.
Is that what it is?
Next
Makes
Vue.
sense.
Because who would name something Nuxt? Like
that's a good question.
Yeah, I think it. Yeah.
I could ask that about Vue and Drupal and any number of other names too.
So interesting fact: the name of the framework Vue comes from the French word for view. V-I-E-W. No, that's Vite.
Isn't it? Oh, that's Vite.
Vite
that's
is
right.
fast.
Okay. Vite is fast.
Yeah. View is the view layer, like the UI layer, right?
Okay, so that actually has significance.
Yeah, if you ever listen Evan took the same strategy. Evan took the same strategy for both Vue and Vite. He just grabbed the French word for
right. Yeah, the story of I always remember the story of Drupal, where it came from, and it was actually a typo.
Oh, really?
Because Dries Boytard is Belgian, and he was trying to do Drupal. It was like a French or Belgian word for drop, like a drop of water, and it was a misspelling, and ended up just sticking with it, and it took off from there. So sort of funny how some of these names come about.
It's the best way, yeah.
Right.
Happy accidents.
Yes. So Nuxt, why don't you give us an overview of Nuxt, what it does and what its capabilities are, at least currently?
Sure. So Nuxt is like the big benefit of Nuxt is the server-side rendering portion. They take a lot of, I mean, you could server-side render with just vanilla Vue, right? But you're having to build a lot of things up on your own if you decide to go that route. So Nuxt makes it really easy to make server-rendered Vue applications. But the really cool thing that's happened with Nuxt 3 versus with Nuxt 2, well, number one, they've embraced the composition API like wholeheartedly. Okay, so Nuxt 3 composition API is like the first party way of interacting and creating, which I like. A lot of Vue developers these days, I think, have jumped on the composition API boat. I know some haven't, and that's fine, but it's kind of the direction a lot of the framework is going.
Mm-hmm.
But the other really exciting part, though, about these Nuxt apps is that you have the ability to specify where and how you're going to render things so granularly. And what I mean by that is you could choose to render a certain page only on the client. So think about just that one page is rendered just like a normal Vue application. You can skip the Nuxt server-side rendering altogether, okay? And that's at the page level. You could do the same thing for the server. You could say, render this page only on the server. Don't hydrate it on the client side. I don't want any of that JavaScript coming down. And, this is just a content-oriented kind of page. I don't need
like an about page or something like that, right? That's the common use case.
Exactly. So you can do that not just at the app level. You used to could do that at the app level. Now you can do that at the page level. So you can mix and match your, different rendering modes per page. But then you can also even do that at the component level. So you could have this, one page that's rendered universally, both on the client and the server. But nested down inside that page, you could have a component that's only rendered on the server. And then whenever the props for that component change, it doesn't run any client-side JavaScript. It just goes back to the server, fetches it, it re-renders on the server, and it replaces that HTML, on the page. So it's a really dynamic way of being able to choose exactly when and where you're rendering your Vue components. So that server rendered example is really great for something like rendering Markdown, right? Loading a Markdown parser into your browser is kind of a heavy thing. And a lot of times what we're using Markdown for is for displaying static content. So we don't need that to run in the browser. We can save so much, time in terms of loading by just rendering that on the server and sending the loaded thing. But then that's just that one component on your page. All your other stuff could still be dynamic. So pretty cool.
So that's sort of the Astro approach to things, isn't it? Pretty much where you can everything server, and then you can have I'm sure you don't use the same terminology. They call it islands architecture, where you can have your little islands of interactivity in the middle of server side content. So that's pretty much at least from that high level. But I'm sure there's a lot of other more dynamic stuff you can do within Nuxt, within your components, right?
Oh yeah, there's tons of other stuff it can do. But in terms of your comparison to Astro, that's exactly right. The Astro is the server rendered by default, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then client rendered by opt-in. Nuxt is kind of the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
It's universal by default, and then you can opt into client only or server only per page or per component. But in terms of like other things that Nuxt has to offer for the Vue developer, just a lot of quality of life things like auto imports for all the composables in your composables directory, things like auto imports for the core Vue reactive functions, things like ref, computed, all that kind of stuff. They just work. You just use them and they work, right? Which is nice. But if you want to still import everything, like you have the ability to do that. You can turn off the auto imports and things like that.
So now if you're using Nuxt, one of the big differences, and I think Next is like this, or some of the other ones, is how your routing is handled. Whereas with a strictly Vue front end, you have your front end routes that you have to define in Vue Router. Whereas with Nuxt, it's all based on folder structure. So you'll have a structure, and then you can define, I want my URL to look like this. So that's how you name your folders. And then you can pass in dynamic values like ID values, and, so it'll render a blog post based on its slug, or, however you have identified it. So that's a pretty common thing. I've seen people, in fact, I've worked on an app one time where they were connecting to a .NET backend.
Okay.
But they used Nuxt because they liked the page routing instead of just straight Vue on the front end.
Okay, that's fair. And a good opportunity for a shameless plug. We do have a Laravel course at Vue School where we do that same thing. We use Laravel for the back end as an API. Yeah, and we use Nuxt on the front end. Pretty cool.
That's interesting. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So my day-to-day is a pretty huge app with Laravel and REST APIs. It was initially built way back in Vue 2. Where it's all APIs, and then the Vue front end connects to the back end, through the defined APIs. I myself, people have heard me talk about this. I'm a huge fan of Inertia JS. If you're familiar, I love Inertia. In fact, I had Jonathan on here a couple times when Inertia was pretty new. Okay, and I work with it with Laravel on the back end, Vue on the front end, Inertia in the middle, and it's awesome.
It's very cool. I've got a colleague that just came onto our team within the last 8 months maybe, and he was really big into Inertia, taught me some things on it, and it looks really interesting. I haven't had the opportunity myself to use it in prod, but
it's really slick. If you're familiar, like Next is, your backend is in Node. You're writing in Node.js if you're doing it in backend, right? So for someone like me who comes from the PHP world, and is familiar with Laravel and PHP, then that's a godsend. Being able to use something like that you're already familiar with, and you don't have to learn a whole new coding technology. So Inertia's awesome, and it's so fast. It's crazy how fast it is. So I'd be real curious to see this course. I don't know if you said it's just Laravel with, if you're using Laravel for the backend with Nuxt, you're still doing the server-side rendering because your Laravel controllers are returning your content to your Nuxt components, and it's fully rendered HTML that it's I mean, you're
Yep.
using Blade templates for the formatting of the HTML, or how is that happening?
So it's I'm trying to find the URL here. So if you just Google, the name of the course is Laravel Backends for Vue.js 3,
Hmm.
and then Vue School.
Right.
I'm sure you could find it.
Hmm.
But the whole approach is, yes, we're still server. Do we server side render in the course? We might turn SSR off. Actually,
Yeah, here it is. Okay.
we do. We turn SSR off, but you don't necessarily have to.
Uh-huh.
You could do the server side rendering bit, but basically we used in the course we used Nuxt just as the client, right? As the JavaScript that runs in the client, and the only reason we chose to use Nuxt instead of straight Vue was just because of some of the niceties like the auto imports and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I remember from a performance standpoint, one of the additions, and I'm pretty sure it's Nux 3, was Nitro, which is
Yep.
basically a rendering engine. So can you tell us
Yep.
about Nitro?
So there's kind of this weird like stacking order of what builds Nuxt, and the Nuxt core team actually have an organization now on GitHub called Unjs, which powers a lot of the inner workings of Nuxt, but those packages are also available for the wider community at large to use, and Nitro is one of
Okay.
those packages, right?
Hmm.
So Nitro is the kind of the server layer there. It renders your Vue components on the server side, of course, and sends the HTML to the browser. But the other really cool thing that Nitro enables a Nuxt 3 project to have out of the box is API endpoints. This is something you didn't have in Nuxt 2. So now you just have a folder in your Nuxt project called server. And then you have a folder inside of that folder called API. And any file within that directory automatically becomes an API endpoint. So you've really got the whole, like everything you need to build a full stack app right there inside of your one Nuxt project. There's no reason to hook it up to an external API anymore. Of course, you still could. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, right? We use Laravel in the course. But if you don't want to have to manage this separate backend, you can actually have you can have your REST API and your and your actual user-facing applications all in the same repo, which is pretty cool.
So it's sort of a drop in if you have APIs written for any CMS, online CMS, versus maybe something, or even something that you have locally, such as Laravel, MySQL, or
Yep.
Node.js with Mongo
Yep.
API defined or something like that. Then you can drop it in and use it with Nuxt.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say you could drop it in. I mean, they do have their own syntax, right?
Okay.
For the API endpoints.
Hmm.
But if you have the data in a database somewhere, you can just start interacting with that database directly via these API endpoints, and then sending the data to your front end, right?
And so is it
So
sending everything as props then? Is that how it's sending it, or how does it send it to the front end?
So on your Vue pages, so you talked about that page file-based routing just a moment ago, right? So
Hmm.
in your Vue components, you call a built-in composable called use fetch, and it makes a fetch request, and you just pass it the route for that API endpoint, right? So you do /API/users or /post or whatever. So that's how you connect your Vue pages to those API endpoints. And of course, on the server side, when you make that request, it's actually going to skip the network layer altogether, and it's just going to go call the function that API endpoint is made up of.
Hmm.
But then on the client side, when you're navigating, first page load, it's all server side rendered and it hydrates. But then as you navigate to new pages, it's going to make that request asynchronously, right? So it's pretty nice. Like it handles things like serializing your JSON for you. So like you can just return an object from the API endpoint. You don't have to serialize it first or tell it what kind of data it is or something like that. You return an object. It assumes, okay, this is JSON, and things like that. You also have type safe auto completions for your API endpoint route. So if I'm calling use fetch on my front end on my page, as soon as I start typing in the URL, I get a list of drop down autocomplete says what endpoints are available, right? So I can just
Oh,
pick, oh, I want API/users or I want API/post. And because it all exists in the same project, that makes that possible, right? So yeah.
so okay. So you mentioned that it's been extracted into its own separate sort of rendering engine. Is it still geared specifically for Vue, or is it something that can be used with other front ends? You know, I think of, for instance, Vite. When Vite first came out, the original iteration was Vue only, and then the next version, he said, okay, you can plug and play with anything, and it's just gone nuts with how many people replace Webpack with Vite and so on. So is UnJS, is this the same idea, or is it still strictly for Vue?
Yeah, it is the same idea. Everything in the UnJS organization is completely framework agnostic, and indeed, other frameworks have picked up packages and have built off them to make their own thing. I can't remember what it is, but there was some other, you know, how the JavaScript world is, frameworks every week.
Right.
But there's some new framework I read about recently that they built their server layer on top of Nitro. But yeah, that's the approach.
Yeah, I've seen that before. I did some work with another company that had a specific JavaScript form renderer where everything was rendering forms, and they extracted it, you know, and made it open source. They had a story where another company used it and made millions of dollars off of their work. They wouldn't even mention the company name when we talked to them, but yeah, that's cool when you can extract that and use it for other things as well.
Yeah.
Any other next things, new features? You know, anything? What's coming down the pike with Next or in Vue 3?
I know Nuxt 4 is coming fairly soon. That's I'm not totally sure. That the biggest thing in Nuxt 4 is there's going to be a change to the project structure. Like a lot of the things that were in your root directory for Nuxt 3 will now be nested under an app directory for Nuxt 4. And I think there's some like TypeScript benefits to that, like while you're watching certain files locally or something while you're developing, now it can focus on just that one app folder or something. I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's supposed to make your development process just a little bit, you know, faster, your dev server a little faster or something like that. Yeah.
So I'm curious. So they're going to do a Nuxt 4, but still base it on Vue 3. Is that right? Because it doesn't sound, everything I'm, you know, reading. I was just reading something by Linus Borg that, you know, Vue 2 to Vue 3 was such a huge, you know, gutting and rewriting of everything, and lots of backwards breaking stuff. Although they did do so, I think it still supported the options API, but it was still so huge. It sounds like Vue 4 is going to be not quite as aggressive, shall we say, or changing going forward.
Which is a good thing. Yeah. And I think the Vue, like where Vue is at in its life, it's stable and it's well loved. It's easy to use. Like I don't think at this point in its lifespan you need this major change like we had from 2 to 3, right?
Right.
Which is great news for developers. It's less things we have to do to migrate.
Mm-hmm. And that'll probably, hopefully, you know, sort of encourage people to upgrade from Vue 2 to Vue 3, which is not a small undertaking, especially when you deal with some very large, you know, enterprise type applications and everything.
And depending on the libraries you're using and things like that. Oh
yeah, absolutely. I do know, and I've mentioned this before, I think it was 2.7 of Vue had composition API stuff embedded in it. And the idea being that you could still be on Vue 2, but slowly sort of migrate to Vue 3 and then, you know, throw the switch and migrate over to Vue 3 from there.
Yep. It's, I mean, they've definitely made some good tooling to help you make that migration. But like you said, the enterprise level, you know, size applications, it's still work and quite a bit of it.
Oh yeah. We have like upwards of probably 500-600 different components in our Vue 2 app alone that's been around, you know, for probably 10, 11 years. So wouldn't be a small undertaking, especially when you start incorporating, TypeScript. Because I tried to mess with TypeScript in Vue 2 a couple times, and it was, it was not a good experience. I mean, it's basically sort of bolted on instead of built in.
Right.
So it definitely made things a lot more difficult. But that pretty much anything large is going to be incorporating TypeScript anymore.
Yep.
Cool. Anything else Vue Next related that we didn't cover that you're dealing with at Vue School or covering?
No, I think we just about covered it all. Steve, I guess I do want to throw in one shameless plug for our Vue.js masterclass.
Of course.
We did release that. It's a progressively released course, so we started releasing it back in March of this year, and we're still releasing lessons where you build a real-world application, specifically a project management app, something like Asana or Monday or something like that. So if you are you have the basics of Vue down, and you want to kind of take it to the next level, this is a really great course for you.
All right, cool. Yeah, I've got the URL up here on the screen for those who are watching the Vue.js 3 masterclass at vueschool.io. All righty. Before I forget, if people want to follow you and give you money and read all your Vue wisdom, where's the best places to do that?
I'll have to go set up the donation app right now. So that sounds like a great idea. No, you could follow me on Twitter. I'm Daniel Kelly _IO. That's where I'm most active, if you can even call me active. I'm not a huge social media guy. But you can follow me there. Vue School is Vue School IO on Twitter, and just Google Daniel Kelly LinkedIn or Vue School LinkedIn. You'll be able to find us there as well.
All righty. So with that, we will move on to picks. Picks are part of the show where we can talk about whatever we want. It doesn't necessarily have to be tech related, obviously within reason, of course. AJ, we'll let you go first. What do you got for us for picks this week?
Boy, oh boy, have I got a good one for you. I don't think I'm going to take this back, because, sometimes I make recommendations and then a month later I'm like, actually, that was a bad idea. Okay. Browsers finally, as of March 2023, have support for ECMAScript modules. Ubiquitous support. So whether you're on iPhone or Android or Chrome or Edge or Safari or Firefox, as of March 2023, all browsers finally support ECMAScript modules. That was about 18 months ago, and that's my threshold for when I say, okay, it's safe to use a browser feature. Because, a lot of people, they haven't had a power outage in the last 18 months. And so if they haven't had a power outage, they haven't, their browser hasn't been updated yet. Because their computer's still going. Or maybe if they're on Windows where it just shuts down the computer no matter what you're doing, like you're in the middle of typing a document. It's shutting down to update. So I guess within 18 months, either people have had a power outage or their computer has crashed from pending updates. So with that, on the browser side, we're good to go. We can use ECMAScript modules. We don't need transpilers. It can work. As of March 2024, there was a PR for ECMAScript support in Node that is now available as an experimental feature in Node v22. So I believe that it is now safe to publish ECMAScript modules without any transpilers. And so you might say, oh, Node's had support for it forever. No, it hasn't. Node has only supported, Node has had the red-blue function problem, the colored function problem, where you can either use ESM or you can use CommonJS, but you can't use both. And almost every module in the entire ecosystem uses CommonJS. So the moment that you introduce an import, an ESM dependency, now you break everything or you have to transpile. But the new feature flag is that as long as you don't use a top level await. So if you just have an init function or a main function, if there's anything that you need to do as part of the initialization of your module, if you're willing to just put that in an init function that you export, or a main function that you export, or, you know, as long as you couch that or put it in a caching function where the first time whatever function needs that thing, you know, it runs. As long as you put the top level await inside of an export, so basically as long as you don't have a true top level await, you can now require an ESM module from a CommonJS module, which means that we no longer have the red-blue function problem. That modules in Node are just modules, except for that one case, if they actually have in the body of the ESM await whatever. And I think that, I hope that we can all agree that it's a sacrifice worth making to move that await into a function that's exported as the init function or whatever, so that you can publish a module without transpiling and it'd be available everywhere. Now, of course, since most people are on, I would say most people, since most popular influencers are now on the TypeScript bus, you know, you're not getting away from the transpiling problem, but that's a topic for another time. You can have, I use the TypeScript checker every day. All of my code is typed. I even am using SQL C with Node such that I had a left join in a SQL statement. And SQL C allows you to write the raw SQL and then generate the code. So rather than writing the code that generates the SQL, you write the SQL that generates the code. Parameterized, all that. It's wonderful. I love it. I had a left join in my SQL code and I got a type error on one of the things I was iterating over. It said, you know, error, this can be null. And that was the moment when I felt we have arrived. Technology is maybe good again. Like maybe we're on the right track. If I can write SQL and get a type error from a left join, maybe there is a bright future somewhere on the horizon. So
I was wondering why I was able to sleep better at night lately. That answers my question.
So that's my main pick. Is just that, and I am, you know, I don't know how many experimental features have made it all the way to the point where they have a flag and are properly documented and everything, and then don't make it in. But this seems like a no-brainer. So I'm willing to put my eggs in this basket and say it's time to use ESM imports. But please, for the love of all that is holy and heavenly and sacred in this world, just use one default export. Don't have a billion trillion exports, please. But that said, this is something I'm excited about. There have been headaches around this for a long time because of the bundlers, not because of the browser, because of the bundlers. It's been a pain in the butt to get isomorphic code working in both Node and the browser. The browser is super easy to do, and Node is super easy to do. You don't need a require shim or any of that. You just need a simple OR. But because of the way that the bundlers do the window detection versus the global this detection versus there's all this crap that you like boilerplate. There's like 6 lines of boilerplate that you have to have in order to get a CommonJS module that would otherwise work fine in Node in the browser without any problem, without hardly like with one line, literally one line of quote unquote boilerplate. For the bundlers, it's atrocious because they all do it wrong. They don't follow the spec. They don't. Anyway, but yeah. So I believe from today onward, I will be writing ESM import and export, and I know that went way over our allotted 2 minutes. Oops.
So in other words, we can blame Flow at Progressive for all the problems. For those who don't understand, in America, we have these insurance commercials. This gal named Flo always talking about bundling insurance. So
they're everywhere.
That's what comes to my mind, unfortunately. Was that it, AJ?
I'm hoping you're gonna field the best dad joke ever, the best tech dad joke ever.
Yeah.
No, okay, all right. Are you gonna do it, or do I need to do it? Is it
I
too
have high
embarrassing for
hopes.
you?
Oh yeah. So let's talk about that. So for those who follow me on Twitter, AJ made a attempt at a dad joke that apparently went over my head. And so I just finally got it explained to me this morning before we came on. So you want to explain it, AJ? And for those who are less dense than I will get it.
I think it just is your experience, not denseness. But all right. So Steve was talking to me, and he said, "What do you think about SQL migrators, AJ?" And I said, "Well, they have their ups and downs."
Wait a minute. Sorry. I was pulling up the tweet. And I didn't get it because I didn't get it because the migration tools I've used don't use the up and down terminology, and so I missed it. And I felt sorry. It was a A for effort, though. I appreciate the thought. Going to the dad joke whenever you see that, that tells me that you're learning.
That warms my heart.
Speaking of dad jokes of the week, let's see. This one's a little long, but hopefully you'll get the. It's maybe a little more visual, but it's what I got for this week. So imagine this thing was Monday, Greg. Tuesday, Ian. Wednesday, Greg. Thursday, Ian. Friday, Greg. Saturday, Ian. Sunday, Greg. That is known as the Gregorian calendar. Right. I was talking to my friend one day not too long ago, and I said, I used to be a heavy drinker. And he said, "Oh, you stopped drinking?" I said, "No, I just lost weight."
Saw that one on Twitter the other day. Great. Yeah.
That was good.
I wrote that originally. I really I write all my dad jokes. And then finally, did you know, it's funny, when you die, people cry and they're upset and they beg for you to come back. But when you do, they freak out. So those are the dad jokes of the week. All right, Daniel, your turn. What do you got for us?
So picks. I'm going to go with a book pick. I have been listening to a book called Fairy Tale because he actually reads books anymore. Listen to it through Spotify. It's by Stephen King. Definitely recommend checking that out if you're into Stephen King. Very, very well written book, and it hasn't gotten to the creepy part yet, but there's little hints of it in there, and it's very intriguing. So definitely recommend that one.
Yeah, Stephen King, you gotta expect some level of creepiness, right?
Absolutely. As far as I'm gonna throw a music pick in here as well, because I've had an earworm for the past week. I'm a 90s kid. Does anybody remember Yellow Card? Does that band name ring any bells?
Yes.
All
Wait,
right.
is that the Her Hair Is Everywhere, or is that?
No. Her Hair's Not Everywhere. Yeah, Believe. No. What was the name of it? The very popular one. Man, I can't even remember the most popular one they have. I think it was called Believe, but I'm not singing it for you. Yeah, that's been my earworm for the past week. Very, heavy guitars. They have a violin in there, which is really interesting.
I love that. I think that's the best. When Hello Maybe came out, that was one of the things that I thought was so great. I love orchestral crossover in any music, be it punk or rap or anything. I love orchestral crossovers.
Oh, it's beautiful because you have, they have a violinist in their band, and so she'll do this solo violin thing, and then the whole band will kick in, and it's really cool sounding. But I think Believe is the name of one of their most popular songs.
Okay. Believe by Yellow Card. I was not familiar with that band, but then I wasn't really listening to a lot of radio in the 90s.
If you remember Story of the Year, they kind of remind me of them slightly, just a little less screamy.
Less screamy, more musical.
That's right.
Cool. All righty. Well, thank you, Daniel, for coming on. It's been good to have you. It's been good to talk Vue on JavaScript Jabber. We've already talked about where people can give you money. So thanks everybody for watching and listening, and we will talk at you next time on JavaScript Jabber.
Thank you all for having me.